province of Quebec has the lowest birth rate in Canada and one of the highest rates of abortion, despite a federal law which prohibits abortion except where the health of the mother is endangered. Dr. Henry Morgentaler has changed that law, at least in Quebec. Charged in 1973 with 11 counts of performing illegal abortion in his East End Montreal clinic, Morgentaler served 10 months in jail, suffering financial hardship, several heart attacks, and severe mental depression. Now he's a free man. In one of its first moves after becoming the government of Quebec, the Parti Québécois dropped all charges against him. A victory for Morgentaler, but bittersweet. He retired from the limelight and took a psychiatric rest cure at a clinic in the United States. Now Dr. Morgentaler is back in Montreal, back performing abortions in his clinic. Last week I interviewed him, and he told me about what he's been through and how it has affected him.
I'm not sure that I was willing to be a scapegoat. I think I was willing to be a martyr for a cause. It is a cause in which I believe very strongly, which is a cause which involves tremendous injustice, which I saw, which I felt that I could do something to alleviate. It is a cause which, in biblical terms, almost I saw as a fight between evil and good, between light and darkness. And maybe I'm a bit self-righteous, but I strongly believe in the freedom of choice. I believe that women should have a right to own their bodies. I believe they should have a right to safe medical abortions when they need them. I think it's one of the great issues of our time, where indeed an enlightened philosophy which respects the dignity of the individual is sort of pitted against what I consider an ideology which is totalitarian, which is disrespectful of people's opinions and convictions, and which condemns so many women to danger of life and health and so on.
When you say you're willing to be a martyr for that cause, what do you mean martyr? Would you go so far as to be able to die for it? That's what martyrdom means.
I was willing to sacrifice myself if need be. In a sense, I didn't want to be a martyr. I wanted to work towards a cause. I didn't want to make some heroic gesture which would get me immortality and that would be it. And in a sense, I did that. For many years, I was working day in, day out to help people in a very immediate way. It so happened that as a result of my campaign and my involvement in the cause, I became sort of, in a sense, the target of so many attacks that you could say that I had become a martyr for the cause, but it wasn't an intended thing.
Well, at a moment when you were in Bordeaux jail and you had that heart attack, some of us thought, well, maybe he'll die there. I mean, we really did think that. Did you feel at the moment, at that time, that you might die?
Yes, when I was thrown into solitary confinement, I had moments of panic when I thought that I would die. I don't want to die. I didn't want to die then. Neither do I want to die now. But as I said, well, people die of accidents. They die of all kinds of things. If I may quote Martin Luther King, who was one of my heroes, it's not the quantity, it's the quality of life that's important, and I believe in that very strongly.
What did prison do to you?
Well, prison was, to a certain extent, an exhilarating experience, in the sense that once you take away all the humiliations, the daily kind of routine against which I had to fight, it was full of individuals who had very interesting stories to tell. And for me, for a short period of time, it was quite interesting. I had known worse. I had been to a concentration camp, and compared to a concentration camp, prison is not that bad. I certainly held my head high. I knew that I wasn't there because I had committed any crime. And once I adjusted to the dismal kind of atmosphere in the place, I could be quite effective in many ways, and I could even say I enjoyed it.
You mentioned having been in a concentration camp. Are you aware of the fact that a number of the anti-abortion groups have spread the rumor that you were never in a concentration camp?
Well, if I would, that's so silly because it's a matter of record. I don't think it's worth answering that kind of insinuation. I was indeed in a concentration camp.
Which one?
I was in the ghetto first for 4 years in Lodz in my native city in Poland, and then I was brought to Auschwitz and in Dachau. And I was liberated by the American forces in Dachau.
How did you survive?
Germany. I'm still asking myself how I did. It was maybe one chance in 1,000 that I did survive. Many others perished, and to a certain extent, this concentration camp experience, I think, had affected me quite a great deal. I still carry the kind of guilt of the survivors. In a sense, my campaign against injustice is very deeply felt. And maybe going back to your previous question, the willingness to take risks to that point, to sacrifice myself, is sort of probably a willingness to deny the evil of the concentration camps, to erase the evil that can be done by people to people, to fight against the inhumanity of man to man. And I see it in those terms.
And you identify with the victim?
Yes, I've always had a very strong feeling for the underdog and for the victim. I was a victim myself, and I think it's my duty as a person to diminish suffering, not only as a person, but as a doctor. That's what I'm doing, is to diminish and to alleviate suffering. It's part of the job, in a sense, you know. When you see people who are very sick, well, sometimes it's not a pleasant sight. Yes, it's part of being a doctor, is to subject yourself to stress in order to help others.
Has it been a strain for you, all of these?
Yeah, it's been a tremendous strain.
On your psyche, you mean?
Well, the psyche and the body are one, really, so it's not just the psyche. Everything goes together. I was exhausted and I was sick, and there are moments when I felt pretty depressed, and it was hard for me to do certain things.
Have you had very severe depression? What has
No.
been the result?
Well, I don't think it was severe enough clinically severe enough, but it was pretty bad. There are times where I felt pretty discouraged and weak, and on the advice of my doctors, I had sort of decided to not to be in the public light, you know, or get away from the limelight and take a rest. And I think it was necessary to sort of recharge batteries, sort of to come back again after a while.
Why do you think that has happened after all of the events? I mean, it's gone on for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think that what happens is that as long as you're inside the battle and things are pending, you sort of go with nervous energy. You know, you have to be there. Whereas once things become easier, you feel the whole fatigue and the whole tension that you had up to now, all the accumulation of all this, you feel it much more. And that's the point which is really much more dangerous in a sense, a point of collapse, sort of.
Do you think you had a nervous breakdown of some kind? Or?
No, I don't think I ever had a nervous breakdown. I never heard voices, and I think I was pretty good in view of the fact that I had so much pressure put on me and so many knocks. I think I withstood it pretty well.
Do you feel like a hero?
Well, that's a big word. I'm afraid of sort of sounding like I'm boasting when I say I'm a hero. Some people consider me a hero, some people consider me a villain. I think that as far as I'm concerned, there's no doubt that occasionally I was doing a lot of stressful work which was in accordance with my beliefs, and I'm proud of that. I'm mostly proud of the fact that I've helped so many people in a very immediate way, a help which they could not have gotten anywhere else. Without any doubt, it was the greatest adventure of my life, where I affirmed my beliefs in actions which corresponded to my principles, to my life philosophy. It had a certain unity to it where I felt good about what I was doing.
Where do you go from here in terms of your own?
Well, where I go from now, I have announced that I will continue to do abortions in my clinic as long as the need is there. I have announced that I am willing to train doctors and nurses in the method which I pioneered in Canada, which I have been using in my clinic. I have offered the provincial government my services as a consultant and to train personnel. And I hope that eventually, once the need for medical safe abortions will be met, that I'll be able to gracefully get out of this area in which I was involved for the last maybe 10 years as a campaigner for repeal of the law.
You say that you can train doctors and you can train nurses to take over and so on, but if the law doesn't change, what's going to happen?
I think the law has changed already in the sense that it's inoperative in the province of Quebec. I see an analogy to the law on contraception. It was on the books for 20 years, but it was known that no doctor would be prosecuted for prescribing or giving contraceptives. I see the same thing possibly happening with the abortion law. it is obvious that the law does not meet with the approval of the Canadian people. In the province of Quebec, we have the assurance of the Minister of Justice that doctors who are conscientious and do a good job will not be prosecuted. Consequently, I am sure that it's just a question of time before the law itself will change. Now, where do I go from here? I don't know. There was a period when I was tired of doing this thing all the time. I need intellectual stimulation. There's not much intellectual stimulation in doing this type of work. Part of it I got in being involved in the cause, discussing the whole issue. I would gladly get out of it already. It's only if I continue maybe for a year or so, it's because I feel a sense of responsibility that now is the time to establish clinics, to train doctors, and to provide access to medical abortion facilities to women who need them. And after that is done, I do hope that I'll be able to go into other areas of medicine.
Will Dr. Morgentaler always have to have a cause?
That's a hard question to answer. I think that having a cause gives me a lot of meaning in life. And I might look for another cause, that is possible, but there might be a time also when I might decide that I'll take a rest for a few years and just live my life as a private citizen.